Good morning. Hi, welcome to Freeway Bible Study for today. Today's the 6th day. I believe it's the 6th day of March. My name's Kurt Bell, and I'm a non-believer. A non-believer of everything. Well, maybe not everything. I believe I'd like another cup of coffee sometimes. You know what I mean. So, why am I doing this? Well, when talking to believers, I'm very interested in religion. I'm actually very interested in truth. And when talking to believers, especially Christian believers, I'm sometimes told that one way to know God's Word, to understand things, is to read the Bible. So it's something I've been told myself. Hey, can I make this green light? Probably not. Let's see. Can I make it without, riding like a speed demon? Hey, I made it. Lucky me. So I'm often told to read the Bible. So I do. Now I've got a red light here, but I can go through it because I'm in the carpool lane. Yeehaw! So I read the Bible, but for the last year or so I've been reading the Bible, one chapter a day, but I've been doing it on my own, in my head, on my commute, like right now. I would actually have it on right now listening, and then I stop and I think about it for a few minutes, and then I turn to a podcast or something. And I decided that I wasn't doing a good enough job. I really needed to listen more carefully and think more clearly about it. So I decided to vlog the process. To listen first, and then turn the video camera on and talk about it. And this is a free-form thing. This is actually thinking out loud, so to speak. I'm not rehearsing things. I may think of a few bullet points ahead of time, but for the most part, these are my raw thoughts as they're spilling from my head as we go. And the goal is to make it from the Bible, from front to back, from Genesis through Revelation, a process that should take me 4 to 5 years. My daughter should be well underway in college by the time I get done. And then after I'm done, I'd like to move on to other religious books and do the same thing. So let's get to today's chapter. I'm in Genesis, and I was doing Genesis 7. Now, if we were, this is a blockbuster scene, right? This is it. This is when God decides. This is when God opens the floodgates and for lack of a better word, he drowns the earth. At least anything that can drown. And he does so with the ambition of maintaining a seed of all terrestrial life in the form of a one man and his family, and pairs of every kind of animal that creepeth and walketh and flieth upon and above the earth. So let's start going through it. It opens right away with Noah, God's chosen man to do all of this. Noah's completed the ark, this big boat that he's going to make, more like a barge, I imagine. I don't think it had any form of propulsion, no sail or anything like that. Basically, it would just float around, probably being guided and nudged, if we can assume so, by the hand of God. So that's all created, ready to go, and God tells Noah, in 7 days, I'm going to open the floodgates. You want to come on over? Come on over. Let's flash this guy. There, he can come on in. There we go. Flash my lights for him. Looks like he's got a mini house there, huh? Isn't that a tiny house in the back of that trailer? Let's go see. It's got solar panels. That is a tiny house. Look at that. That's so cool. He got the solar panels and everything. Yahoo! So he tells him, get everything going. 7 days is all he got left. So God, I don't think Noah and his family had to round up the animals. It sounds like Noah and his son did all the heavy lifting. I'm sure the women were doing, their things, but we don't know their names. We don't know anything about them. We don't know their ages or anything. All we know is it's Noah and his sons Shem, Ham, and Japheth. That's something I can't remember quite pronounce the third son's name. Anyway, the animals appear probably just like we see them in our nursery school books, appearing 2 by 2 to march in. You imagine, cue the music, dun, 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 dun. The ramp is down this big door, and they're marching in, and Moses is sitting there with a clipboard. Yep, zebras, check. Penguins, check. Whoa, do the penguins have to show up? They can swim. I don't know. That's Interesting. What about the penguins, walruses, sea lions, sea otters? What about them? I imagine they were all there. Check, 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 check. They're marching in the boat or the ship or the ark, and then they're in the close the gate. But it's interesting to note as I was reading through that, how the heck did I make it to 54 years old? And I thought all along that line of animals was 2 by 2. See, a pair of elephants and a pair of zebra and a pair of hippopotami and all that kind of stuff. But that's not what the Bible says. The Bible says that they will arrive and be kept in the ark, every clean animal, whatever that is, in 7 pairs, and every unclean animal in 2s, a pair. So the only thing that was 2 by 2 was the dirty animals. So what would that be? Well, clearly, probably, these are early Jews, so maybe swine, anything with a cloven hoof. They're 2 by 2s, and then, we got lions. We got a whole pride of lions coming in, right? 7 lions and 7 lionesses. Now we've just compounded the space problem, by 7. And how's Noah gonna know what's clean and what's not clean? What if 7 pairs of pigs show up? Is it no, none of that? Just you in the lead. The rest of you get back out there. I don't think so. I think we can assume that God was helping out with this, and they were appearing in the order that God wanted them. I guess that's probably how it worked out. Noah probably didn't have to do that thinking. He probably didn't even need a checklist either. But that's amazing. So why the 7 and the 2? I can see why 7, right? I mean, what if one of them dies on the voyage or heaven? Well, we know that the lions are going to want to eat the antelope. So if they eat a couple of pairs of antelope, because they're not going to be on the ark for over 5 months, if they do that, and then when they disembark from the ark, there's nothing left for them to eat, so they're going to need to immediately begin. The carnivores, at least, are going to need to eat the animals, and the herbivores are going to have nothing to eat. All the plants are going to be dead. Let's just assume that's all been thought out by God and figured out. But anyway, we've got 7 by 2s coming in, filling up the ark, and God says, in 7 days. He looks like he fills it up 7 days ahead of time, and then he announces the exact day, which is like a Tuesday or something. I mean, it's really specific. And I think he even says the exact time that it all begins. And I wonder if Noah, Shem, Ham, or Japheth, any of them, or the daughters, weren't walking around because I'm sure they had made quite a scene with all the locals, building this giant ark, especially when the animals started showing up. Hey, did you see what's going on down there with old crazy Noah and his boat? There's this constant stream of animals, 7 by 2s. Oh, speaking of that, how do they know? Did I say that already? How do they know what's dirty and clean? Because we don't get to that kind of stuff until much later in the Old Testament do we have some identification of what constitutes a clean animal and a dirty animal. God so far hasn't instructed us that, but I think I covered that. We assume they know. All the locals must have gotten some idea that the gig is up, right? I mean, yeah, it's one thing for Noah to be saying, yeah, this is going to be my retirement hobby. I'm gonna float away with this thing, even though there's no water nearby. I'm gonna float away with this thing with my wife and retire. So crazy old Noah. But once the animals start showing up, it's maybe not so crazy Noah. Maybe something's up. And I'm sure God probably protected, because I'm sure people started, packing their bags and saying, I'm going to hop on that big old boat with all that, get in line with the animals and get on there too and save myself. So something happened to protect that. But anyway, the appointed time comes, the rains begin, and the story is so well written. I'm just imagining young Yahweh, God, again with my 10th grade English teacher, Mr. Duncan. And Mr. Duncan's reviewing this chapter, because, we're day by day, Mr. Duncan is helping Yahweh with his creative writing. And he's looking at this chapter and gave A+. Yahweh, you knocked it out of the park here. I mean, this is really good. Again, of course, no character development, but that's okay, because we're not here for the character development. We're here for the special effects. I mean, Yahweh did a great job. I mean, he's leading up to it, all that's coming. 7 days from now it'll all start, and we the reader don't need any help, because in our culture we all know this story. And if you're a casual reader of the Bible and gonna see if maybe you're like me and you've elected, I'm gonna push through the whole darn thing. I'm gonna last. Maybe you're a believer. You say, I'm gonna know every chapter, and not just gonna wait for, Father Bob, or maybe I should say Pastor Greg. My brother mentioned to me yesterday that I should listen to some Greg Laurie, which I've been listening to Greg Laurie for a long time. I really like his soothing voice. So maybe I'll refer to my, I don't know, I kind of like calling him Pastor Bob. Calling him Pastor Greg kind of feels like I'm knocking him. So maybe I won't do that. But anyway, so Pastor Bob, instead of relaying that, I'm going to go through the whole thing myself. And so remember this lay armchair Bible reader gets to this part, and they're like, whoa, yeah, great. They'll go pop some popcorn, This is like when you go to the movie, you go to see, Die Hard or something like that, and the scene comes up that you know what's going to happen, right? I mean, you saw it 1,000 times on the previews on TV, right? This is the scene where Bruce Willis and the bad guy's hanging over the cliff, and Bruce is, he pulls up a gun at the last second while Bruce is trying to help him, and Bruce lets go, and the bad guy's falling through the air with the backwards cameras panning backwards and forwards. It's that incredible special effects for its time, and the bad guy's shooting his gun or something like that as he falls to his death, and we all know that's coming, so you're all ready for it in the movie. This chapter 7 of Genesis is just like that. We all know that this is coming, and we get all excited, and God doesn't fail to deliver. We don't need any character development, because this is, like I said, we're here for the action. And the action comes, it's a terrible action, of course. The floods begin, and so two things happen. The Highway Patrol. No, the Highway Patrol did not arrive. Two things happen. One, and it's again lyrical, beautiful wording. It says the fountains of the deep were broken open. I just love the way that spills off the tongue. Of course, it's a translation into English, but I imagine in the original, would it be Aramaic, Greek, whatever it was, it probably had that same beautiful quality to it. The fountains of the deep are broken open, and the reservoirs of the sky are opened up as well. So you've got water rising from below and falling from above, conspiring to raise the surface. And just imagine, so this is where maybe this will shut me up a little bit, sober me up. I'm being a little flippant with some of this stuff. We're talking about genocide, though. I mean, we're talking about something I don't even know what to call it, when you wipe out everything except the things that swim. That's not genocide. That's apocalypse. That's Armageddon. That's apocalypse. This is astonishing. So the waters are starting to rise. Specifically, the Genesis says that God seals Noah and his family in. So I think if God is sealing the doors, I think what he means is he's protecting it from anybody else. So imagine all the people running in from the area around that knew about the ark, or running to the ark, and hammering at the doors with their fists or whatever instruments they can find, pleading, because they realize now that they're doomed, and they're pleading. And this went on for quite a long time, 7 days, right? So I don't know how long it took for the water to hit the ark, but for a long time, the families inside had to listen to the pleading of the people that they shared the community with. God, the Bible says that they were all wicked, so maybe they didn't like any of them. Well, it said everybody was wicked except Moses, and we're assuming, I guess, his sons weren't bad either. In which case, that was a stark marked difference. And wow, can you imagine them sitting inside the conversations between Moses and his family as they listen to the screams, of mothers outside holding their babies, mercy, please! And they're looking at themselves and saying, Moses, looks at them and says, they're all evil. They all deserve to die. God told me so. I don't know if that happened. I don't think any of this happened. But, that's certainly a sobering image. And of course, all the animals and plants, and not the plants, but the plants aren't moving around. All the animals and people are moving up towards higher ground. I imagine on the hilltops and the mountains are starting to congregate. It's becoming quite a mess. I mean, it must have been a very terrible scene to witness or experience, if it really happened. So the waters rise for early rains go for 40 days and 40 nights, and the waters rise to the point where All the highest mountains are underwater to a depth, I think it's at 15 cubits. And I think a cubit is like 6 feet, or maybe that's a yard. I don't know exactly what a cubit is, but it's some, some ancient measure. And so it's 15 cubits. So everything's buried. And the water stayed that way for, I think it says 150 days, which is 5 months. That's enough time to smother everything. And here's where everything, that is, of, touchy-feely sea things. I mean, all the plants, all the animals, they're all wiped out now. I imagine the seas are just, floated and bloating with corpses. Of course, the bacteria are having a field day. Now we've got this, another ocean is going to be kind of brackish now, right? It's a combination. I'm assuming the water that came from above and below was fresh, and so that's changed the salinity level. But we don't need to get in there. I mean, I'm sure if God's behind all of this, He can preserve the seafaring animals, not the seafaring, but the seagoing animals, just fine. But God specifically, here's what I do have a question about it. God specifically says that everything that creepeth or walketh or liveth upon the earth will be wiped out utterly. Now we know that that's certainly not the case. Tardigrades are a special, little type of small animal that in their variety and their diversity can live in any environment. And I won't dwell on this too long. You get the point, right? I mean, tardigrades can live in outer space. They can, so I'm sure that they would have no problem. They live in the soil. They would have no problem getting through the flood. They are definitely walk. They've got little legs and stuff like that. So again, God either, just speaking to the people of His time who didn't know better, or it's a human being writing the thing and they didn't know any better, because from their perspective everything would die, or it's just a story, right? Again, well, in both cases, that's in the second place, that's the case. So I'm trying to get back. Let me get back on track. So now, 150 days have come, and there's no olive branch in this chapter. I think that comes up in the next chapter. And at the end of that time, Noah and his family are sealed up, and we are basically done. The apocalypse is complete. This is, and forgive me for stretching the analogy. This is not unplanned. I just popped into my head right now, and this may offend. And this whole exercise of this Bible study is not a vehicle for offense. This is, no pun intended, a vehicle. This is a vehicle for consideration. This is exactly how I operate, right? This is how I live my life, thinking things through. So if you wonder what I think about on my commute, this is exactly what, who cares, right? Well, what's that? A hat. Who cares what I think about on my commute? But this is what I do. I think about things. And it's fun. It's my hobby. But, okay, just imagine. Gosh, okay. I'm going to go ahead and give it a try. Just imagine... Man, everything's just deflated out of me right now. I mean, my whole body just kind of slackened. Okay, just imagine you're in, one of the concentration camps in Germany in World War II. You're a worker there. Maybe you're a guard or something like that. And in comes a trainload of Jews, gypsies, homosexuals, undesirables. And of course, we all know the story, and I won't linger on this too long. They immediately come in. They're interviewed at the point of entrance. Some of them, half of them, go off immediately to be gassed, and the others to be worked to death. And maybe the train you're working, maybe you're the man, you're a clerk, and you've got a manifest that says there's 10,600. No, that can't be that many on a train. Maybe it's 2,425 souls, so to speak, on this train. And they arrive, and your job is to catalog, what's going to happen. Some of them are going left, some are going right. Dr. Mengele is there, picking a few off to take away to his activities. And you go through this whole day, and at the end of the day, you have completed your work, and you're getting ready to go home, and you look at your manifest, and you count that of the 2,225, maybe 1,572 have been successfully executed and have been cremated, and their ashes have been whatever they did with the ashes, right? And the remaining number are now in their horrible living circumstances, beginning the end of their life. And you're done. And so you kind of put on your manifest, and you mark you're done. You don't have a time card, and you start to walk to whatever you're going to do. Your shift is over. Go have dinner and all that stuff. Your work is done. Now, I'm sure that the men that were doing that, and some women perhaps, got used to it. In fact, I know that was the case from reading histories. But imagine like it's your first day on the job, and you're a young man. Maybe you're 19 years old, and you join the SS, for the allegiance of propaganda and dreams of the fatherland and all that stuff. And you've just completed your first day playing your role in the systematic annihilation of over 1,900 human beings, men, women, and children, and you've got another 1,000 or so, 500 to 600 to go. What is that like? What do you think about when you go back to the mess and having dinner? Maybe you can still smell the ashes in the air. What do you think about? Do you go home and do you go back to your bunk and sleep right away, or are you up all night staring at the ceiling? Maybe tomorrow's another day like the same, but a little easier. That's what I'm imagining at the end of this chapter. I'm imagining Moses, maybe not Moses. Moses is, he's part of the game. He's a chosen one. Maybe one of his daughters-in-law. We don't know what their names are. We don't know anything about them, but we know that they were selected. They were probably an arranged marriage, and maybe there's a young woman. Let's just call her. I don't want to pick a biblical name. All the names that come to my mind are biblical. Lucy. Now I picked an archaeological name. Maybe her name is Lucy. And the seas are calm now. Maybe Lucy has seen the bodies from the window. She's certainly heard the screams. She's certainly aware of what's going on. That she's one of the select. What's it like for her at the end of chapter 7 when they're beginning the long 5-month float? There's 7 and 2s of every kind in the hold to be fed. God's clearly helping out in some way, because that would be an impossible feat otherwise. No, I'm not. Well, I guess I am. I'm making no disguise that I'm equating this genocide with the genocide of what the Nazis did, and the only difference might be is that some might complain that this was justified. And justified by what? Justified by the will of God. And I can't argue with that. If the story is true and God is the creator, then he can do as he sees fit. I'm not required to agree with it as an imperfect creation, and I will exercise my will, and I will stand up and say no. That was terrible, especially given, like I said in yesterday's video, that this was all as a result of God's, poorly designed. Hey, you were my brother. Sorry. It was all the result of God's architecture in the first place. But imagine that little Lucy there. What was that like for her? I'm just gonna let that sit in my mind. Maybe none of them thought those thoughts. And what a strange world that would be if they didn't. Who wouldn't think those thoughts? Would you? Would you doubt at that point? Or would you doubt God's decision, this whole thing? I mean, sure, I'm on like the young Nazi guard. I'm on the trigger end of the bullet of the rifle instead of the business end of the rifle. So I'm one of the lucky ones. Does that excuse it? Does that make what's happening right? Last point, and then we'll finish off. So I pointed out yesterday that it was a curious thing if you get out the calculator and start doing a little timeline study. I mentioned, well, actually I didn't figure this out until after I turned the camera off, but if and there's more to it. I'm not just recounting what I said on Facebook. I'm going to add to this thought. I mentioned that on Facebook that if the Earth is 6,000 years old, which number comes from Bishop Ussher and his Scottish, I think he was Scottish or Irish clergyman, who did his famous calculation to work out that the creation happened in 4004 BC on like a Thursday at 6 p.m. Amazingly astonishing accuracy. Anyway, so a lot of the 6,000-year-old old Earth creation myth stories build on that. And I just saw a comment yesterday, someone saying, kind of, you know, pointing out that I'm taking things from the perspective of young Earth creationists. Yeah, I guess so, because you know it's the most, dare I say the word, it is the most absurd perspective. So it's the one that stands in my mind. I know there are others. I mean, there's, you know, Francis Crick, and I think it's Crick, who, you know, is it Crick who just uncovered the human genome? You know, who is not a young Earth creationist. He's a believer, but he believes in, you know, the 4.5 billion year old Earth and stuff. But that's not so interesting in my mind. I mean, those more reasonable perspectives don't require as much attention. So if I lay more attention on the more absurd propositions, then that's because that helps to illustrate the extreme end of the scale. I'll assume, and maybe I'll make pains to point out from time to time. Thank you for the person who left that comment, because I'll make sure I do this, to point out from time to time that there is another perspective. There are old Earth creationists. There's a whole range of different perspectives. But I will also point out that in itself is a problem. That the fact that there's a whole spectrum of belief on the side of believers indicates that the Word of God was delivered through poorly delivered in a vehicle that is so subject to interpretation that it can be fractionalized into so many different perspectives as to render none of them seemingly, I mean, the whole kit and caboodle seems like it can be thrown out as a result. You know, a creator would have done, I think a wise, you know, omnipotent, omnipresent, all the omni creators would have done a better job of laying their message out. I think it would have been more mathematical, something that could be subject to solid proofs that would be incontrovertible for every society, any time. It would be a timeless classic, timeless immutable classic. And it's not. So anyway, back on the point about the old Earth, you know, 6,000 years. So Bishop Ussher and his, you know, Earth creation started Earth was created in 4004 BC on a Tuesday at 6 p.m., all that kind of stuff. If you lay that backwards and you do the chronology as I've done from Adam to Noah, I think that takes us to 21 or 2200 if you allow for the 100 years. Oh, Noah had his sons when he was 500 and the flood came when he was 600. I think that takes us to around 2200 BC. Is that right? No, if it's 2100, that takes us to 1800 BC. I mean, I forget I'm going backwards, right? So it takes us to about 1800 BC. Now, look at the world at that time. I mentioned yesterday, and I mentioned specifically yesterday that if that was the case, and if Noah, and so if Adam lived to be 930 years old, and ancient Egypt got its start in 3100 BC, then that means Adam was alive at the time when ancient Egypt was coming together, congealing out of the desert into a civilization. That was kind of an eye-opening fact. But if you take that a little further back, so that's Adam, take it back to Noah at 1800 BC. Let's look around take a little inventory of the world at that time. So the Chinese, they go back 4,000 years, so that means they were about 200 years into their civilization. Great written records in China. I mean, you have some of the best chronologies of Far East history going on them, so they're well underway. The Persians, they've got their culture. They started right about that time, right at the flood. The Persian culture was coming into its own right then in Babylon and little places like that. So imagine, that's interesting. So the flood happens, and then like immediately within decades, Persian culture emerges. That's problematic. So we've got China, We got the Persians. We got the Indian subcontinent. That goes back to, I think, 3000 BC. Oh no, let's not. Before we get there, let's pop on over to the New World. I think the Mayans, they're going at it, right? I mean, I think they're back between 2 and 2500 BC. They're going at it too. So you got the New World recording things down too, and you've got, let's take us back to the Indian subcontinent. Indians are at 30, I think they're at 3000 BC, so they're well underway. They're 800 years or so into it. No. Yeah, they're like 1200 years into it. And then of course, get back to the Egyptians. Oh my gosh. I mean, the Egyptians, what is that, 35 or something? 3500 BC? They're well underway. And then let's not forget the ancient proto civilizations of Persia, Babylon, the cradle of all of so much. I mean, there are records back there, I think, that going back 100,000 years. And let's not forget about the Neolithic, all that kind of stuff. I'm getting out of hand, but my point is, at the time that the flood happens, we've got at least China, Egypt, India, Mesopotamia, and the Mayans. That's 5 major civilizations well underway at the time of the flood. And the curious fact that none of them record this event, and the fact that they should have all been wiped out. Every one of those should have gotten a hard stop. All their written records should be buried under silt and in a ruined civilization, but they're not. They carried on. And the thought that came to my mind was, imagine, the United Nations, a meeting at the United Nations, maybe next week, and they all get together, and Israel shows up at the United Nations. And are they a part of the United Nations? I guess clearly, because Israel was formed by a proclamation of the United Nations. So I guess clearly they would be. And they show up and they say, their representatives say, "Woohoo, man! What about those aliens? They came and enslaved the earth, last week." And all the representatives of all the nations are like, "Aliens? What are you talking about?" Yeah. They came and enslaved the whole world. The guys from Israel are saying, the delegates, "Yeah, aliens. They were here. They've been their ships. They populated everything. We've got it all written down. The story's right here. They came out of their ships. They enslaved the entire earth. They wed all of our women, and now we've got alien babies running all in the womb and on their way. Their gestation is 3 days, so they're starting to pop out like anything else." This is going on all over the world. Does this happen just in Israel? No, everywhere. It's all written. It's all in our thing. And all the other delegates from all the other countries are like, "What the heck are they talking about? There were no aliens." That's kind of what it would be like, right? Imagine some. I mean, it must have happened that some guys from some believers in all this stuff must have met someone from Egypt, which is just down the road from the Holy Land, and we're like, what about that flood? The guys in Egypt, what flood? You mean the flood of the Nile? Yes, it was a good one this year. We got lots of silt in the croplands. We're going to have a great harvest. No, not that. That's routine. I'm talking about the big flood. The one that wiped out everybody. What? So clearly, that alone can dismiss. I think we can safely dismiss the flood myth as a myth. The flood story is a myth. And that's a slippery slope, right? Because if we begin to dismiss that as a myth, then what about the 6 chapters before that? And of course, the real dangerous, the precipice that this slope leads to is if we dismiss, chapter 2? Chapter 3? No, chapter 3, the fall. What if fall never happened? Original sin is a story, and we're not all actually carrying around that hereditary guilt. That's a heavy-duty implication. And with that, I think I'll stop. Thank you for joining me for another Freeway Bible study for today as the sun blasts over the top of Mount San Jacinto up there. That mountain up there that you can see where the Mount Sun is, that's the one that not Ansel Adams, but John Muir said was the view from it was one of the most pristine, one of the most sublime views he'd ever seen, looking over the desert. We'll complete with that a beautiful thought in natural history. Thanks for joining me. Have a great day. Make it a good life. Take care. Bye bye.